Hey, how you doing?
That voice scared.
Oh, David, how do I change my name?
So you have to go to um more. No.
If you click the three dots in the top right corner, it should be a drop-down menu and it says rename.
Yeah, you can do that, or go to participants and click next to your name, the three dots also, and then you'll be able to change your name as well.
All right, well, we will go ahead and get started. We have a few attendees in the webinar. So I just want to say hello and welcome everyone to our webinar today, which is Staff Identity Panel, Navigating Difficult Situations. And today's webinar is sponsored by the GLACUHO Inclusion and Equity Committee. My name is Greta Dieter. I use she, her, hers pronouns, and I am the GLACUHO Technology Coordinator hosted at Western Illinois University and your technology moderator for today's webinar. Before we begin, just a few technology housekeeping items to maximize your learning for this session. So if you would like to ask any questions of our wonderful panelists we have here today, they'll answer as quickly as possible. Just use the Q&A button that is located in the bottom center of your screen. Should you experience any problems, feel free to direct message me, utilize the chat box, and I will assist you. And at the end of this session, the presentation and audio recording will be available on our website, glacuho.org, under the webinar archives resource for your future reference. We encourage you to share this resource and all of the other resources with those who are unable to attend. And I will hand it over to David from our GLACUHO Inclusion and Equity Committee to get us started today.
Awesome. Thank you for that introduction, Greta. Hi, everybody. My name is David Martinez. I work at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. My current title is Inclusion and Talent Development Specialist. And thank you for being here today on this great Friday. I hope the weather is amazing by you all. We're expecting a little storm out here, maybe a little rain, but it's Friday, getting ready for the weekend. So again, I appreciate you taking the time to be here, and I hope that you enjoy and take something out of this discussion. And a thank you to our panelists, who I will let go ahead and introduce themselves. Let's go ahead and start with Vedika. And please correct me if I'm not mispronouncing any names.
David, yeah. So my name is Vedika Saruke. I use she, her pronouns. I am currently the Assistant Director in the Office of Res Life here at Oberlin College and Conservatory. I moved here from Texas not too far ago, so enjoying the weather so far. I'm glad it's not hot and warm and humid here, so I'm enjoying the weather so far. And yeah, that's me.
Thank you, Vedika. Brittany?
Hi, everyone. My name is Brittany Mitchell. I use she, her pronouns. I am the Assistant Director of Residence Life, Community Standards, and Student Care at Oakland University Housing. That's Oakland in Michigan, not California. Just thought I would specify. I do conduct and case management for our department. So anybody who might be facing a policy violation or have emergency student needs, I will support them.
Thank you, Brittany. Karen?
Hi, everyone. My name is Karen Gunalan. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm currently at the University of Toledo. I'm one of the Residence Life Coordinator at the University of Toledo.
Thank you. And Emily? It seems that Emily has joined as an attendee and not as a panelist. So they might not have
I will get that changed over.
Thank you, thank you. So we'll give just a second for that. But one question I had for our panelists prior to joining the overall session was type into the chat a song that you can't get out of your head. So something that you've been listening to nonstop recently. The one that I gave was Sweet by Hozier. And once Emily joins, okay. Emily, go ahead and introduce yourself, please.
Sorry, it takes a little bit. Oh, there. Okay, the light. Hi, everyone. My name's Emily. I am the Assistant Director for Campus Life over at Knox College.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. And so again, this panel is created by the Inclusion and Equity Committee for GLACUHO. So thank you all for joining. If you have any questions about GLACUHO, as Greta had said, visit glacuho.org and it should have all the information there for you. So thank you for joining today's panel webinar titled Staff Identity Panel, Navigating Difficult Situations. And so I'll give a brief introduction in what the topic is, where the idea came from. So in my job at the university, I had hosted a couple panels right now, and one of them was surrounding difficult situations and how we navigate those in our roles in housing. And a separate one was talking about our identity and how our identity impacts the work that we do. And so I thought, why not combine them? Why not talk about how our identities influence how we approach and navigate difficult situations that arise in the workplace? And so throughout the webinar today, I want us to try to not place a negative connotation on the word difficult in difficult situations, because difficult situations are a norm in our everyday work. And they may provide some opportunity for growth. So I want us to really try not to only think of them as something that's negative, but something that we can utilize in our everyday work when solving problems. So the webinar will work like this. I have a couple questions written down, and the panelists have received these questions and had some time to think over them. So I will go through the panelists I have for the questions I have for the panelists, but if you have any questions, please type or click on the Q&A at the bottom of your screen on the Zoom window, and we'll be sure to ask them after the questions. But if there's any follow-up questions that are related, I'll be sure to address those and ask our panelists for you. So thank you again. And so I wanted to start off our panel with a quote that I found. It says, "Things we hold that don't impact the way we receive resources or gain access or privilege in society are seen as personal identities. Sometimes personal identities are confused with social identities, and social identities are those things that lump us into groups and either give us power and privilege in society or inhibit power and privilege in society." And this quote is from Nora Ali, who is the Director of Social Justice for Campus Inclusion and Community at Northwestern University. So to open up the room and break some ice, I wanted to first allow our panelists the opportunity to tell us a little bit about themselves. And this can be you sharing your identities or going a little bit more into depth about what you do at your institution. So we'll go in the same order. Let's go ahead and start with Vedika.
Hi. So as I introduced myself, my name is Vedika. I started my role 6 months back. What I do here in Res Life as an assistant director is I oversee the light cluster communities at Oberlin. So light meaning all the language houses that we have here, the identity spaces and the theme housing. So we do have academic ties with academic departments, which meaning that we have faculty directors that we work with, faculty and residents, for example. So we have ties with those departments. They do amazing work at the language houses. We also have identity spaces, so women in trans buildings. Our Oberlin College here is big on LGBTQ student population, so we do have women in trans spaces. We have different identities. So Asia House, for example, is a different identity space that we have here. Speaking of the theme housing, we have substance-free housing for students in active recovery. We have first generation housing that is going to be something new for the next academic year. Pretty excited for that. So it's specifically we have an Oberlin College initiative for first generation student support. So a new theme for those students. We have noise control, noise reduced, quiet floors, stuff like that. So those are part of theme housing. We have sci-fi theme. So everything that falls under the light cluster are those buildings that I oversee.
Thank you, Diga. Brittany?
I think I'll talk a little bit more about what I do here at Oakland as it pertains to my identities. I am a Black woman with a bunch of other identities, of course, Christian and Detroiter and all the things. But specifically when it comes to this role, I do conduct and case management. And, we have a very diverse and rich population at this institution. And sometimes our Black and Brown students can appear hyper visible and experience conduct in a way that can be just, different from the intended outcomes. It's supposed to be an educational experience and things like that. So I'm very grateful for the opportunity to be able to support students who are coming to me at a low moment, whether they were accused unfairly or fairly, or don't understand what's going on, and have a productive conversation about how they've impacted the community and how the community has impacted them as well. And I really appreciate the rapport building that I get to do, and that most of our students come from our Tri-County area. So I probably will be familiar with the high school that you name if you tell me what high school you went to. And that being a part of my local identity, I think that kind of plays to my benefit when I'm doing a lot of work to disarm students who might come in at a heightened level of anxiety or frustration and things like that. So I think just as it pertains to identities, I think some of where they might work against me in some spaces, in the work that I do here, I appreciate that they typically do serve me as a starting point to connect with students. Thank you.
Thanks for sharing, Brittany. Karen?
Yeah, so for me, I think my identities that I identify it first is like I'm an international, I'm also Indian. So these are some identities I bring into the space that I work in. And not necessarily like sometimes it might work, it may not work like to my advantage, but I always try to like make sure that my students' identities are always supported too. For example, like if like a lot of times I meet with the students of different background, so like trying to understand them through conduct. And a lot of time I meet students because of conduct, not really because of like they have concerned like roommate conflict and things like that, because we have like our graduate assistants who always like do that kind of concern. So like trying to understand where they're coming from and what their background is and why they did what they did, because sometimes a lot of time it may not be identity, it's something they're going through in that situation. So like trying to put aside my identity and just like have that human connection, something that I always try to do with my students. So that they don't see like, I think I connect so much with Brittany, because so that they don't see conduct as like a punishment, a punitive system, so to just see us as a support here. So that's something that's really important for me in my job, to acknowledge their identities before putting mine in. So yeah.
Thank you, Karen. Thanks for sharing. And Emily?
So I just came into my role as the assistant director for campus life. So I've been in housing for 4 years now. I am a first gen student, first gen in housing. I am also Latinx and in the queer community. I would say a lot of the times that my work with students is really focused on like that developmental piece of just having them build connections with us as staff members, and see like that we are here to support them through the process. We are not against them. And I feel like that is a common theme that I've seen just with students in housing. They're like, okay, like the system, there is a system there, and sometimes it does work against, like it seems like it's working against them, but I want to make sure that they feel that there is a space and that there's a support system for them here. Knox College in particular, we have a really diverse population for our students. We have 6 cultural center houses on campus that work really well with our intercultural life office, as well as our cultural organizations. There's a space for them to be able to just like have that sense of belonging on campus. I think I agree with the points of being a conduct officer. Sometimes, like instead of students would see that as a punishment, but rather like we want to be developmental. We want to build rapport, and that continue to support them beyond, policy violations happen, but how can we learn to be responsible citizens, not just, on campus, but how they can take that into their future careers.
Thank you. And on that note, I just want to thank all of our housing panelists for all the work that you do, because this work is not easy. And we will see as we go throughout the panel, just how difficult it can be to be having these discussions, but how they provide opportunities for us to grow as staff, but also for us to empower our students. So I'm going to go ahead and start with this next question. And in the same order, if you don't have anything to share with this particular question, please just let us know and we'll move on to the next panelist. But please share an experience where you approached a difficult situation in the workplace. What happened? What tools did you use? And what was the outcome? And we'll go ahead and start with Vidika.
Right. So the difficult situation that I have experienced has had mainly to do with the cultural nuances for me. Is sometimes people might not understand, and also apologize, but I completely skipped defining or introducing my identity. So being a South Asian woman, being a person of color, being cisgender, of course, there are different nuanced identities that I have that other people might not be aware of, or simply being here, especially at Oberlin College, being a PWI, then how does my marginalized population then serve at this place and as a position that I am here at for my role? So there are certain nuanced challenges that we often face as people of color. So similar experiences here, and then how I approach the situations is, firstly, I just try to assess like what's the intent behind it. Sometimes it just might not be intentional. Sometimes it's, the people might not be aware of the nuances. So just having those private one-on-one conversations with them, that has helped a lot with me. Just trying to convey like, okay, that was culturally insensitive to some people. So just being mindful of that, and just that has always worked for me, and that has happened quite a few times. So I mean, not a big deal, I would say, but then just making that clear upfront, making those conversations. Might be difficult to have those conversations, especially if you're new to the place, new to the team. But yeah, those one-on-one conversations have always helped me and worked for me. So I would highly recommend taking that approach.
Thank you for sharing.
I think I'll
And
talk.
Brittany? Go
Yeah.
ahead, sorry.
No problem, sorry. I think I'll talk about an incident that took place a while back where over the course of a weekend, of course, when the professional staff isn't here, someone went around to a number of whiteboards in one of our communities and wrote the N-word on there. It was incredibly difficult to figure out the intention of targeting some of the students who got the message were Black, some weren't. It like they kind of went down the hallway and just hit as many as they could. And the responding resident assistants were Black students. And as I tried to piece together what happened over the course of that weekend, I found out that some of our response as RAs, as university housing, did not meet the protocol to call up and to investigate what's going on to the people on duty for that weekend. At first, they were just erasing it and just moving on like that was something that was supposed to be glossed over and things like that. So by the time we got back to Monday morning and tried to piece it together, I got an opportunity to work with a lot of people who were impacted or would have to support the situation after the fact. The residence director, who was a white person, supporting them through supporting the students who were impacted by the words, the residents who saw it on the board, the RAs who responded to it and responded inappropriately, to find out later that they felt, well, it's just something that we have to deal with. And that culture and that expectation of, yeah, I'm Black, I shouldn't be impacted because I'm an employee here. That was something that we had to unpack and support while we were supporting the students who actually got the words on their boards. Supporting my professional, the white person who's responding to this, so they can understand how their identities also serve in that space. Just because it happens to involve a lot of people of color who are responding to this doesn't mean you don't have the space or bandwidth to show up in this space and support it as you know how to. And how to deal with just the many components that go into making sure people feel safe after a situation like that, and regarded, and how not to make this another reason somebody feels alienated or disenfranchised from a space when we don't know who did it. We don't have cameras facing the room doors and things like that. So it was a lot to navigate in that situation, and trying to put a bow on it. It was a really good example of what collaboration in a hard situation and really being ears in a space that required a lot of them, how that would help you navigate that situation. Because a lot of times all it was listening. We could not, I can't tell you to this day who did it. But we can listen, we can help people feel safe, we can offer room changes if that's what they want. We can let our students know that just because you're a Black student here doesn't mean you can expect to encounter that and move on, like that doesn't have an impact on you, and helping them work through those types of situations as well. It's got long, super sorry, but that's kind of the bulk of the story. And I think it kind of got to touch on how just all the components work together to serve the students at large.
Oh, thanks for sharing. I heard a lot of things about accountability. I heard a lot of things about helping helpers. And so thank you for sharing. And Karen?
Yeah. Brittany, sorry that happened, but so something similar, but not really similar. So something that happened, I think first thing, there's two things I want to share. I think first, as an international student, and also now trying to support international student, a lot of times institution always talk from a very Western and American perspective. I think that is something that I'm trying to educate my peers, my coworkers, when they are educating their residents on how to be in general, just be friends, just be human. Just, I know it's different identities, but how to not laugh at people when they're talking in a different way, so things like that. I think it's as simple as that, but then the effect mentally for our students is a lot, like coming from my own perspective and then looking at students now, like, okay, yeah, I don't know how to say this word. I don't want to say this word because you're going to laugh at me. Microaggression is really, it's real, but no one actually educates international students coming in that you're going to go through this. This is how you navigate it. And also, no one is actually educating. Maybe some of us are, but not, there's no like a whole course, like, okay, domestic students, this is how you treat people, how you support people that are coming in. It shouldn't always lie on international students. So that is one thing. I think another thing is police department. I think in my previous institution, like some of our students are not okay with having police come into their space because of what has happened, like George Floyd and all that thing. So in my previous institution, it is a residential campus, so like you can have alcohol party and all in your space. But because the party was too loud, the police decided to enter the space, but the police only decided to enter a black space, not other space that was having the same loud noise and things like that. So the students, our black students, felt like, okay, like, like handcuffing and things like that. I think police also should be educated on like how to support our students, how to be friends first. I know you're still empowered there, but how to like come down and meet them where they are. So that is something, some tools that we use for that was we try to have like a roundtable with the police chief and allow them to listen what our students have to say. And the outcome we came was like, before police comes into a black space, the person on duty is going to interfere first and see what the situation's all about before we call police, unless it's a medical emergency. So that's how we deal with that. And another thing with international students, I try as much as I can to like allow international students and my RAs to like, hey, you're not laughing at them because they don't know how to talk. You're going to go and ask them again, can you repeat? So that is as simple as that, like tools and outcome that I've done with my RAs. I want to say like RAs means resident assistant.
Bunch of terms for them at different institutions. I was just talking with somebody the other day, and they said it was titled on their campus community educator. But thank you, Karen, for sharing. Definitely a lot of weight to that. And you did cut out for just a little bit, but just your video, but your audio was great, and now it's back, so we should be good for now. But thank you again. And Emily?
So one of my previous institutions, I was one of 2 women on the staff, and I think a lot of the times was giving the perspective of being a woman in the workplace, being and especially representing my female identifying RAs. There was I think one situation that was kind of ongoing, to one of my RAs who was a woman, was being targeted after responding to an incident with her residents. And the residents were, it was getting really aggressive of just like feeling like being watched on camp, or being watched when you're trying to go to your home, banging on their door, just being really loud and like saying really negative things about my RA. It got to a point where there were dents on the door because of how, yeah, just like the amount of targeting was getting a lot. When I talked to, people in my staff about it, I felt like it was just not, it wasn't really being heard to the situation where there was a lot of urgency. And we had this conversation about like what it means for, this could be triggering for like domestic violence or just domestic disputes, and just feeling unsafe in your place. I had multiple conversations with that RA and their roommates about like how we can go about getting temporary housing for them, or just being able to just continue to document these situations. We did work together alongside our Title IX investigator to make sure that there was a no contact order put in place, resulted with moves that were happening. But it just felt like there was a lot of advocating that had to be done. And it felt like there was a situation where I felt like it was just kind of obvious where we need to put that support on for my students to feel protected. But it was just having to continuously put that perspective on there. On that side too, same year during duty rounds, they had to go outside for a lot of for their duty rounds, and it was not well lit. So we started advocating for like, what does this look like? Like, should our students start carrying pepper spray, or the like the noisemakers? I think if you're all familiar with Birdie, you basically pull it and this loud sound comes out. And we started talking about like, what if our RAs carry that at night, just so they feel a little bit more safe. That conversation, a lot of the times we're just like, I just don't understand why that's necessary. Like, I, as a man, don't really need that. And I'm like, okay, well, you said as a man. So we just had to really talk about like what that violence looks like, what it feels to have to, be on the lookout when you're going on your rounds by yourself late at night in dimly lit places. Eventually we were able to buy those supplies for RAs, but still like those talks, it was in talks for a while before we were able to get those safety measures into place.
Thanks for sharing, Emily. Definitely, a lot has happened since I've been out of my own res life roles, and hearing about these stories brings back some memories of my time in res life as well. So I can connect to some of your experiences. So again, thank you for sharing, because I know it takes a lot. The next question that we'll move on to, again, I'll say it again for our participants who have joined. Please, if you have any other questions, you can enter them into the Q&A slot at the bottom of your Zoom web, and I'll be sure to address those as I can. And if they relate to the current question, those will be addressed immediately. So the next question we have for our panelists, and I'll type this into the chat as well. Did you ever feel the need to reframe your approach? And this can look like removing your biases, addressing discrimination to the situation due to considerations of your own identity or the identities of others involved. There's a lot to that question, so I'll give our panelists just a little bit to think about it, and we'll go ahead and start again with Vidika.
Sure. Before I get started, I would like to address what Emily just said. Emily, I had similar experiences very recently, being one of the RAs being bullied or being picked up on, and all of the bulletin boards were trashed and that particular space. We tried to have community meetings, we tried everything. So at the end, we just decided to make it easier for that particular RA. So we decided to move her to a different space to see if she was being targeted or just something that the kids are doing just for fun. So we had to do that and make that decision to be easier on the RA, because I understand that that would mentally affect that person, and just, it's not great when one RA is suffering. So, very similar situation. So going back to the question, did you ever feel the need to reframe your approach? So something that happened this semester since I've started here is we did some initiative for voting across campus. So how Oberlin works is it's a residential college. So all of the students have access to all the residence buildings and not just their own building, which is very unique that I'm seeing here, is they can tap into any building they want. So which is why we were intentional about having those campus partners come and table at our residence halls, because that's where students eat, that's where students sleep. So it made sense to bring those campus partners to those residence halls. So at one particular time, this particular tabling happened at one of our language houses, being African Heritage House. So obviously it's a intentional space for African American students. It was not taken very well because the staff member, the campus partners were white, and so they felt uncomfortable having those folks come into their residential house. And so it was an issue which was brought up to me, and we tried to reframe our approach, and then I had to sit down with those RAs and the faculty director to explain the situation, being a space that was geographically made more sense to have that tabling in that particular house. And so the reasoning behind it, and of course it was not just the campus partner, but it was me, a woman of color, also showing up and being there during that entire tabling and that entire programming. So those are some situations that I have observed, and I wouldn't say it was like a bias or a discrimination, but it was just like having that conversation about, okay, what was the approach, why the intent behind it, and why we did it the way we did it. And so the outcome was positive. The only thing was that they just needed like a heads up, and this was a last minute thing that we planned. Of course, student affairs, everything happens last minute. So just for the next steps was sitting and deciding what would happen next time would be like a fair amount of time notifying the RA, so they could then connect with their residents to give them a heads up, like, hey, someone would be visiting our house and then our building and blah, blah, blah. So just, working things out. I'm not sure if that answered your question, but that's all I have.
You did great. You did great. Thank you. Yeah, mapping out the steps. And if we need to, taking a step back, reevaluating the situation. And as Vedika had shared, being a person who identifies as the community in which you're trying to support, or being a staff member who cares because you also share that identity. I feel like that also plays a role in a lot of our lives. But also, I feel like it is holding our fellow staff accountable, especially staff who may not share those similar experiences and I put discrimination and bias, but I also put the little etc. thing in there just for us to really open our knowledge to what we have experienced in the past and be able to share and connect. So with that said, I'll move on to our next panelist. Again, thank you, Vedika, for sharing. Brittany, go ahead.
I think I'll just share what the strategy is in general whenever we're addressing conflict in our unit, in our department, with our student staff, with any of our staff. It's 2 ADs of Res Life in our department. I do conduct the case management. The other one is staff and student development. And it helps to have that built-in sounding board to be able to really interrogate what we're looking at. There are times where I'm aware of the fact that, if it's a racialized incident, which I know I've mentioned too now, these are not like every day, but sometimes those are particularly challenging to navigate in that it's also my job to go back and look at how our policies impact all the people. So I have to go back and look at where the disconnects started so that we can eliminate getting to this point in the future. But it always helps when I have somebody else who has different identities than me when it comes to like, you know, race, where we came from and things like that, to just bounce my ideas off of, to make sure I'm not approaching this from a lopsided perspective. I do the same thing for people who are outside of our particular unit. I might go to my director, I might go to the residence directors who are, you know, more boots on the ground with the situation anyway, and just say my thoughts out loud and see where we land. That really helps me to reframe my approach from looking at the question, reframe their approach to be appropriate for whatever the situation is. We have a already built out protocol, but sometimes it requires a little bit more investigation, a little bit more digging, and a lot of verbal gymnastics sometimes to help people draw the conclusions that they need to without feeling like they're being beat over their heads with like a moral lesson that they didn't see coming because of a smaller, lower level infraction that could have led to a larger type of infraction. So I think that's the most helpful thing for me, is to have that other set of ears who could help me see where some of my deficits might be when it comes to my perspective.
Thank you. Karen?
Yep. So thinking about this question, I think not necessarily like bias or discrimination. I definitely echo with Brittany. Like whenever I am in a situation where I feel like I'm being biased because I'm like, I want to support the student in my best ability. Maybe sometimes a student just needs a learning curve. So like I always make sure to like go back to my supervisor, and then she asks me like 10 other questions. I'm like, dang, I didn't even think about all these questions. You know, like because every time I think we go in with so much empathy, like wanting to support the student, I think sometimes I forget about, okay, you at the end of the day, you did do something, you violated something, I still need to hold you accountable. So like it's I think it's really important for me to have someone else to hold me accountable to, like my supervisor, my coworker, where I can bounce off ideas and then come back and talk to the student back. And I think that's how, like, one of the situation we had to reframe our approach for sure. Like as much as we say our conduct process is very educational, we still have punitive stuff in it. Like for example, like probation and things like that. Students are scared about whenever probation, just the word probation comes in, students are terrified. So when looking at this situation, because the student was also struggling mentally, it was not okay for me to just give the student probation and take away all the leadership roles that he has in his position, right? So I had to like go and like, you know, like advocate for the student. And like I felt really good advocating for the student because I've seen the students work on my own, how they actually are and things like that. So after talking, and we came up with like a solution. And it was really important also because the parents were really involved in the situation too, but the parents were not a very positive environment. The parents have created for him a very positive environment for him to grow and learn from the actions that he have made. So we had to reframe the approach to not give him the probation, but give him other educational outcome, like, you know, behavior decision making. Like how do you make your decisions as a student leaders, because you're going to impact other students too, and yourself and your future. So things like that, I think that's how we had to reframe our approach to just look at the student as a student. And I think at that time I didn't even think about my own identity or the student's identity. I just want the students to have the best experience they could have. So that's one thing that I wanted to share.
Thank you for sharing, Karen. One thing I try to remind myself of daily is, and to remind other staff too, is how we treat each other, how we treat other staff is how we treat our students. So that's just something that came to mind as you shared. But thank you again. Emily.
When I got this question, my immediate, like, what my experience went through was responding to policy violations. I served on duty for like a lot, you know, it's part of the job. But responding to policy violations, I know is scary for the students, because it's like, oh shoot, I'm in trouble. Like, am I going to get kicked out of housing? Like, am I going to lose my privileges to participate in my sport, like my organization? All of that goes to mind. But I think the biggest thing too is when when you have to respond to a policy violation, are you working with your campus safety officer, and what does that look like? I think over the course, I started in 2020, and over the course of my years, I know that I had to develop a good relationship with our campus safety officers when responding to incidents, because I don't want the student to feel that this is just a police force coming in to get them in trouble, like they're going to get yelled at, like something's going to happen to them. So working with them and understanding like who is going to take the lead, a lot of the times we advocated for the campus life professional to be taking the lead on those responses and go more of a support, go from more of a support angle rather than punishment. I I've had times where I would just have public safety just be waiting outside the door, and then or just like for my backup in case there was like a lot of individuals who did not want to go through with the process, or yeah. But I think that also comes to mind of when we enter spaces. In a lot of our housing contracts, it says how campus life professionals, maintenance people can enter houses or enter spaces at any time. There's circumstances where we enter the spaces, but a lot of the time students don't know that, and they think that we're just violating their privacy. And what I would encourage is working on like building that transparency and allowing and giving students more resources and more information about when people would enter their space. We worked at my previous institution, we worked a lot on what transparency looks like, what written communication looks like when we enter spaces for health and safeties, for example. I recommend giving students enough notice in advance to allow them to be prepared for people to enter their space, but also giving them the grace too of when we do have to conduct those health and safeties. I like to just be very transparent about why I'm in the space, like what I'm looking for, and then what follow-up looks like if I find something of against policy violation. I think it just builds that respect too. Like, I think a lot of the times our students are like, oh, like they're making us like respect them, but our students deserve just as much respect as what we deserve.
Thanks, Emily. So we have about 15 minutes left. I'm going to read the next question, but we do have 3 more that we would like to get to. So I want our panelists to think about which ones they'd want to share most. So I'm going to go ahead and ask the next question, and let's go ahead and have the panelists raise their hand via Zoom, and then we'll go in that order. So the next question is, how has your identity influenced the support you receive when approaching these situations? And some further information to reflect on this question is this could include the role of colleagues, supervisors, or other sources of support in relation to your identity. This is a tough one. Karen?
Yeah, I think when it comes to like how my identity influences support I receive, I think in my job, like it's really hard to find someone who has the same identity as me, working with me, right? Me, I think that's a privilege itself. So I think I try to like one thing that I do is I try to adapt to what the situation is. I have a great supervisor. Even if my supervisor doesn't understand what I'm going through, at least there's someone to talk and bounce things off. My coworkers, although we don't share the same identity, at least as a person of color, that I could like, okay, this is what I'm feeling. Do you feel the same? If not, I guess it's just me. I think another thing that when it comes to like situation like this, a tough conversation, difficult conversation situation, if it's only in housing and residence life, I always look up to my supervisor and my coworkers to get some ideas. if it's like my own identity being affected in the workspace that doesn't relate to like in student affairs, I have a lot of like international professionals that I look up to, that I can share and bounce ideas. I think it's so important sometimes to like just have someone who have gone through a walk through the same way as me, to just like, okay, I'm doing it right, okay, I can do this next. So that is how I use my support. Most of my support for my personal and professional comes from outside, except for when it's housing, then I look up to my supervisors.
Thank you, Karen. I think it's important to flip this question around also and think about how we approach helping our fellow coworkers, and the identities that we hold, what they have gone through and what we have gone through, how that differs, and the extent to which we can help. And if not, what other resources can we refer? Thank you again for sharing, Karen. If nobody else has their hand raised, I'll go ahead and move on to the next question, which is, how do you approach follow-up after a difficult situation occurs? And we'll go ahead and do the same thing with raising your hand.
Is it cool if I go?
Yes.
Thank you. So I think I would kind of stick in the same vein of going to the people who could offer insight to make sure all the considerations have been thought through. I think that's really important to me when we're following up after a tough incident with the student, or if it was a hard workplace decision and things like that, making sure all the considerations were thought through fully. And so acknowledging that, hey, we might not have gotten everything that we wanted out of this situation, but how can we make it better moving forward? And just being very honest about the fact that, some things could have happened on my part, some things could have happened on other parts, just to make the situation better. But moving forward, let's put something in place. I think I like to leave meetings, for the most part, understanding, hey, moving forward, if something like this happens, what would you like to see happen? Like, what will make this situation whole is what I usually ask students. If you had a magic wand, what do you want to see happen with this particular situation? And most times I can't do the magical thing that people ask me for, but again, it gives me an opportunity to see where the disconnect started and what we could have done before we got to this point to make the situation better for all involved parties. So at least following up and let them know, say, hey, we can't get it to perfect, but I want to at least do something for you. And if I could do something for people, it usually does at least partially remedy the situation.
Thanks for sharing, Brittany. I like what you said, how there's no like magic. There's no magic, but what we can do is de-escalate. We can check in on people. One thing I admire about one of my supervisors is that they specifically block out time in their calendar to go and check on somebody. Like, let's say somebody's family member has passed and they block out some time to go and ask that specific question and not just a general, how you doing? So yeah, that's just another thing I recommend. But yeah, follow-up is very important. Thank you for sharing. Right. Any other panelists that hope to share? I don't see any hands. So I'm going to move on to the next question, and then we'll get to some Q&A. So the next question is, what resources have you found most valuable? Have you engaged in trainings or utilized specific guides that consider diverse identities and navigating workplace challenges? And then there's a follow-up question, but I'll ask that soon. Emily?
Okay. First and foremost, not to be cheesy, but like rely on your network. I feel that the relationships that I've built with people of different institutions, especially within GLACUHO, like I'm able to just find resources outside of my institution and just kind of like chat with colleagues about how they would handle it from their perspective. Like if I notice that I'm frustrated with something, or like a difficult decision happened where like it wasn't like what I agreed with. Sometimes I just need to take a step back and listen to other folks who, sometimes just need a third party opinion. I think also just having that open-mindedness, or that open connection with your supervisor on things. I think just like having that conversation with them is really important too. Just so you feel like your ideas are also being heard. In terms of conduct, I would say look into restorative justice trainings. Those are it's really important for going in more of a lens of like, how can we restore the community and how can students be involved with the process of their development in education. I liked using that when I was a conduct officer, for students feeling involved in their own developmental paths, of restoring the harm that they may have caused in the community. But it also builds that connection with our institution, with our department, and then just helping them build the skills of being a responsible citizen.
Thank you, Emily. And Vidika, I believe I saw your hand was raised first.
Yeah, thanks. So what resources I have found to be most valuable, I would echo with Emily being like looking at our network. So ACPA, for example, would be something that I have heavily relied on. The commission that I am actively involved with, and Karen would agree to that, is how that commission has helped us, the Commission of Global Dimensions for Student Development. It's a commission for professional staff or anybody who's like interested in international education, internationalization of higher education, or even international folks and students, professionals. So that space has been like a safe space for me to have those difficult conversations or address those issues that somebody who has similar identities as I have shared those experiences. I could guide them. So finding those key network in your roles, it doesn't have to be necessarily in your role, it could just be anyone. And then, having somebody to mentor you, I think that especially if you're international, if you share that identity, having somebody to mentor you goes a long way. So you can understand how you not only transition to the space that you're in, but also the nuanced experiences of how higher education works. It might work different in different countries. So having that mentor to really help you and guide you through it, that has been beneficial. And also the resources, like also having your practice, like having theory informed practice. So what's in the literature out there? What are we doing right now? What other institutions are doing that could be something that we could rely on, or could be helpful. So revising or reassessing our current practices to see, okay, are we at par, or are we doing something better, or how could we improve? So having those resources, attending conferences that focus exclusively on DEI. We had one conference a couple of weeks ago that focused on DEI. So attending those conferences if we are able to, and especially if they're free, that webinar was free for the entire day. So that was good, a virtual conference. So something like that could help improve our understanding and what's out there right now and how could we improve. Those resources have been helpful.
Thank you, Vidika. The follow-up question to that one is, how can we collectively move forward after this panel? So our attendees learning all of this information, our panelists learning from other panelists. Think of a couple sentences that you really want for us to take away. Myself as a learner also being the facilitator. Go ahead.
I think for me, it's important to remember the things that are challenges in some spaces are assets in others. And I think that's one of my favorite things about some of the interactions that I have with students. It's not just because I'm a Black woman, but because I get an opportunity to connect with students who are maybe from my city or around it, or because I am actively aware of how certain things can be perceived, or simply because I understand where the train of thought was going when they did a particular thing, because a younger or another version of me might have done a similar thing. I appreciate the fact that, navigating this space here in student conversations can be a real asset because of who I also present myself to be. I'm not just closed off, but I use some of those identities as inroads. And I love that part about my job.
Thank you. Karen, go ahead. But just before that, I want to say that I inputted the link to the evaluation or the assessment for today's panel for all of our attendees to complete. This helps us, the Inclusion and Equity Committee specifically, create further initiatives. So please fill it out when you get the chance. And Karen?
I think one thing I want to share is how can we collectively move forward is I think when going into a space like I think acknowledging who you are before you go into the space or when you are entering the space, and also providing that space for others to voice out to, because sometimes we tend to take all the space to like talk about what we want to see, but instead, I think acknowledging there are different identities and background in that space and giving everyone the time to also voice out their opinion or whatever they want to say. I think that's something I think a lot of like student of color, especially a person of color, like struggle to get that space. So give them that space first. Even if you want to say something, probably give them that space first before you share. So I think that's something that I would love to leave before I leave this panel.
Thank you, Karen. All right. I don't see any other hands from our panelists. So thank you to the attendees that have joined. I don't see any questions inputted into the question and answer box Q&A. So it seems like our panelists answered all the questions that they had. Again, thank you to our panelists for sharing your expertise on your own experiences. And I hope that our attendees and our fellow panelists really take things away from this panel as we move into the weekend, which I'm really excited about as we move into next week and end out the year. Thank you everybody for joining. And Greta, do I hand it back to you?
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Thank
Okay.
you for sharing your knowledge. And again, this will be posted on our website, glacuho.org. Thank you.
I have a question. I think the form is not working.
Okay.
It says that invalid link. Is it just me?
Let me see.